Hello, security pros, and good afternoon. And thank you for joining us on today's Government Insider webinar. I'm Hannah Boone, the Marketing Director for ESA, and I'm excited to lead this webinar here today. Before we dive in, I'd like to provide some tips for those of you joining us on your first ESA webinar. First of all, welcome, and you will be muted for the duration of this session, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. So if a question or comment comes to mind today at any point during today's session, please click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try and save some time for your questions with our experts here today. We'll also be recording this webinar so you can rewatch the on-demand session and share it with your colleagues. Tomorrow you'll receive an email thanking you for your attendance today, along with a link to the recording. We at ESA realize that your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending some of that time here with us today. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Jake.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of ESA's Government Insider. I am Jake Bronger, ESA's Vice President of Advocacy and Public Affairs. We're glad you could take some time to join us today. For this episode, we are talking with the living legend, Stan Martin. And I'm gonna heap a lot of praise on him because it's very well deserved, as people know his story and his career so far. And we're gonna get into that. We're gonna be hearing a little bit about the advocacy highlights today, including the historic victory over the Baby Bells. And most recently, though, Stan was the inspiration and is now the namesake of ESA's Stan Martin Excellence in Advocacy Award, which was introduced at ESX this year. And the first recipient of that was Dr. Shane Clary as well. But Stan was the inspiration for it. We thought, who could we name an award after that is the kind of ideal, or at least reaches for that ideal, for peak advocacy efforts, and that was Stan. So let me tell you a quick bit background for those of you who might not know Stan. Stan Martin is the current executive director for SIAC, the Security Industry Alarm Coalition, which is a nonprofit formed by TMA, ESA, SIA, and CANASA, and it's to be the one voice of the alarm industry on alarm management issues. Stan has worked in the alarm industry for 45 years and the alarm dispatch reduction issue for over 30 years. Stan owned and operated his own alarm company for 15 years and was the executive director of NBFAA, which is now ESA, and was a vice president with ADI for 7 years. He is the chair. He chairs the alarm subgroup for the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and the NSA, the National Sheriff's Association. He has conducted training and seminars in China, Canada, and Mexico, and addressed thousands of law enforcement agencies in the U.S. He is a recipient of the industry's highest awards, including Tri-Industries Triton Award, TMA's Stanley Lott Award, and ESA's Morris Weinstock and Sarah Jackson Awards. So, Stan, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. It's an honor to be here today. Thank you, Jake.
All right. Well, let's get started. I know we've got a very limited time, so I'm asking a lot, but how did you get involved in the industry in the first place?
I had my alarm business, and maybe like a lot of people watching this, I was kind of my own chief of bottle wash. We had a great little company. Didn't feel like I needed anyone else. Good little operation in Dallas. And one day, somebody from National Training School came in from NBFAA back then. Said, "Hey, you need to get involved." And I go, "Why?" He said, "Well, do you like what's going on?" I said, "Well, not really." And he said, "Well, then you need to be part of the change. Don't you want other people to determine your future?" And that statement kind of rang true. He said, "Get involved," and he said, "We need people, and we need people who are willing to speak up." So, I did, and it was very fruitful. Started going to association meetings, networking, and hey, pretty quick I found out, I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. There's a lot of smarter people out there doing things better than I was, and through the networking, you learn and you grow your business. And that's, of course, one of the best reasons to be a part of a national association.
But you didn't just become an activist or an advocate. You actually found yourself as the executive director of NBFAA at one point. Could you talk to us about how you found yourself in that role and the state of the association at that time?
Yeah, sure, Jake. I had my company for about 14 years and had sold it. But right before I sold it, the reason I had the Sarah Jackson Award is reorganizing the time NBFAA, and nobody wanted to have a representative from all the states, but back then, that was really where all the state chapters really wanted to go. We want to be on the board, we want to be part of it, and I was an advocate for those folks. We spent a couple of years reorganizing, coming up with a structure, and then we passed that new structure. Now, when they have 60 board members, and I'm going, okay, I won my awards. I'm relieved. I'm selling my company. I'm retired, and then Pat Egan, the president, calls me and says, "Hey, we just fired the last executive director. We need somebody up here to help out." And I said, "Well, okay, I can give you a few months." And after I said yes, I realized, oh no, we just put 60 members on the board of directors, and now I've got to manage that first meeting. So, hey guys, I like to say, God's got a sense of humor, But, we did get through that meeting. There was a lot of disconnect in the industry. We were trying to bring everyone, back together, and it was a start of a new chapter for the association business. And I actually, it worked pretty well for quite a few years. And of course, a couple of years ago now, things have structured back the other way, and that's due as well. So, excuse me.
So, what years did you serve as executive director? Can we I want to put a timestamp on this?
Ask me questions on them. It was, I don't remember it. Back, I'd have to pull up my own resume to look at, to tell you the truth, but it was back somewhere in the 90s, I guess, early 90s.
Well, we know it was before 1993 because that was when NBFAA took on what is known as the baby bells. And, as I discussed with you previously while I was researching this, I'd never heard that term, the baby bells, or the issue that they had that was going to impact the alarm industry. Could you talk to us about, who was the baby bells, or who are the baby bells, what the issue was, and what did, what was your role in challenging it?
Sure. The telecommunications industry really was controlled by well, it was first AT&T. Judge Green broke up the AT&T into segments, and we ended up with 7 regional bell operating companies. And for those who've been around, it's like Southwestern Bell, Bell Atlantic. These are terms that are very common back in those days. But these 7 bells controlled all telecommunications. We didn't have satellite communications. There was no two-way communication over cable. No, this before internet. So these guys controlled everything. And one of the things they did is they constantly used their monopoly power to undermine small businesses and segments of the business and put them out of business. And they had the power to do that. And we realized after we took a look at what they were getting ready to do, because they were in the process of purchasing alarm companies, it was pretty clear they were going to get into the alarm business. We looked at them even closer and realized that the answering service business used to thrive once, and once the bells entered their business, they decimated that group and completely. Nobody knows what an answering service is anymore. With the newer technology, they put them out of business in less than 2 years, and they did it with unfair competitive practices. So we were really faced with a serious problem. Our monitoring went over. The only way we could monitor were over the Bell telephone lines, and if they were in the monitoring business, they would do just like they do with the answering service business. People would call and say, "Hey, we want to have our stuff monitored by ABC company." And they say, "Well, you don't need to do that. We can do it now." And they preempt those customers and cut them right over into their own business. So the threat was huge. And of course, they played down the threat, but we'd seen the history of what they could do and realized it was a threat for our livelihood. Mm-hmm. That's a short version.
Well, and so, yeah, you took on essentially what was, a monopoly that was broken up, so to speak, into these smaller groups, but that were still very much utilizing their large market share and were considering basically trying to take over another industry. And so you engaged with the members to activate them, to get them involved, to start writing to the members of Congress and visit DC. we actually have a quick video clip that Hannah's going to show from 1993. And I just love the style. But first off, you can tell it's 1993 in the video. But let's take a quick look at this minute portion of this video here.
Industry, but what we're trying to do is just make all the congressmen up here, the new ones particularly, aware of what our issues are and how important it is to this industry that the telephone companies be, held out of our competition. I mean, they've had years to build up these huge organizations using monopolistic powers, and we haven't, and now we look like we might end up having to compete with them, and it's just certainly not fair.
Based on a conversation I had with my boss last night, I have good news for you. John Bryant on bill for you. And I will tell you, you have been the most effective grassroots operation I have seen, because we see you personally. The NRA has a reputation for being very effective, but we don't see them in the office. We don't get letters from back home and then follow-ups with visits. With you folks, we get letters and we get visits, and I think that's really terrific.
All right, thanks, Hannah. No, that the most effective grassroots lobbying effort was led by you and NBFAA and the entire industry put that together, and you guys took on the baby bells.
Jake, let me make a slight correction there. It wasn't just me. Obviously there was a huge team behind me. I was only executive director there for a year and a half. We had Jim Sink after me, who carried on the fight. The legislation actually didn't get passed to the year. He took over, but we set the foundational work for getting that bill passed. As you know, sometimes it takes 2 years, 3 years sometimes to get a bill passed. But once we got what we needed, it was just a matter of waiting through the time period in the committee work. But also, I wasn't the brains behind it. Let me just mention that Bill Signer, who still works for the industry today, was our lobbyist. And Bill came to me and said, well, I actually asked Bill, so what do we need to do to defeat the bells? He said, we got to get people in front of members of Congress. We got to write letters. We got to show them we're a real industry, and you don't have money, so we need to show up in D.C. and address our concerns in front of these members of Congress. And he said, I can tell you who to see and help you set the appointments, but I need you to rally people. Let's get them into DC, and let's get the letter writing campaign going. And so my part was just organizing those aspects. He really dealt with the overall strategy, and it ended up being very, very effective. We just shortly the letter writing campaign, we actually talked about the fact the bells have put the answering service business, out of business, and why they were a threat as a monopoly, and why we weren't looking for special protection. We were just looking to be able to compete at a fair level. So what we're looking for is exempting the bells from entering the business for seven years until there were alternate modes of communication like we have today: wireless radio, satellites, internet, cable, all that. But members of Congress had no idea what our issues were and why the bells were such a threat until we started explaining it to them in letters. And then we set appointments in DC. And there weren't thousands of us that showed up. There were 100 or so, and 120 maybe. But we went in groups to each office, and I may have mentioned this to you before, but it's very effective in the sense that we created this illusion of 1,000 or 2,000 dealers in Washington, D.C., because say I go in, my person in Texas, visit my Congress folks, I would take along the New Jersey guys, the Oklahoma guys, in between appointments where they weren't going to see their representatives. And so we went in as a group of 8 or 10. And, they would generally, the appointment was set with me, let's say, and and they never ever asked who all the other people, they just assumed they were from Texas as well. So we did the same thing with the New Jersey guys and each state. So it was pretty impressive from the members of Congress point of view, because they'd never seen that many people showing up to lobby them. And we had a good story to tell. I mean, the threat was real. We exposed things like CP&I. People don't know what that is today. We still benefit from that today. That's customer proprietary network information. That's where the Bells collect, and they still do. It's called data mining today. Where but remember, they had a monopoly, but they knew who your pharmacy was, who your doctors were, who your monitoring company was. They knew everything about every customer that had a telephone line. Everybody had a telephone line, and they could sell that information. They could use it against competitors. They could sell Walgreens customer list to CVS. There are all kinds of things they could do, and some of it they were already starting to do. So another thing that we explained to Congress, you can't let them use that information without restrictions. And in the end, part of the law that got passed was that they could no longer use information from customers without getting a signed release from every customer. And for years, Bell sent those out every year saying, please sign this so we can send you other marketing. And nobody ever signs them and sends them back. But anyway, that's that and the letter writing campaign. And we're very effective. Of course, now we have emails. It's even easier to do. But it was education process. But again, the difference is, and she said it. She said that was the aide to Congressman John Bryant. When you show up in front of your member of Congress, there's a huge difference in somebody who lobbies, gets paid to do that, and they really listen to you because they're representing your interests. And it just has a very profound effect when they believe their constituents are there, and small businesses representing their interests, and they want to accommodate you if they can. Some of them don't. They're not all going to swing your way. But that it's a matter of numbers. And part of our strategy was, let's find out who the key members are. Let's go visit the key people who are going to vote on these in committees, and let's count votes. And I don't know if I'm saying that all too fast, but I know we're limited time. So
no, that's great. I don't know if you've ever seen the TV. It was a mini series on HBO called John Adams. And with Paul Giamatti. It was a very good one. If you're a history guy, I really recommend it. I thought it was fantastically done. And there's a scene where John Adams gets very upset with one of the other founding fathers from Pennsylvania, and basically calls him out in front of everyone else in the Continental, well, it wasn't Continental Congress yet, but kind of the delegation there. Ben Franklin pulls him aside later and says, well, you insulted him in public instead of in private. And he goes, well, yeah, would you prefer I insult him in private? And he goes, that's perfectly acceptable. But if you insult a man publicly, they tend to think you're serious. And I think that's kind of exactly what you're getting at is, I meet a lot of people in the industry who are very opinionated on political issues or, how things are run from a government perspective that would impact the business. And then maybe they'll post something on Facebook or social media. But if you actually reach out to your member of Congress or even show up in their office, they tend to think you're serious. And that's a big difference from just kind of, venting on social media, venting online, and actually showing up and requesting something from them.
No, you're exactly right, Jake. In fact, I didn't mention it, but the Bells literally had dozens of lobbyists. They're paying $10-20 million or more in lobbying fees to stay in front of these members of Congress. So they had the ear of Congress, and it seemed a bit overwhelming at the time. But our dealers showing up in these offices completely neutralized that lobbying effort by the Bells. So I can't overemphasize how important it is to get out get in front of these guys, especially when ESA is going to do the hard work. They set up the appointments. They'll create talking points for dealers where you show up at whatever the time is. They're only going to give you 5 or 10 minutes maximum. You may not always meet with the Congress or senators are very difficult to meet with. The members, congressional side or the House side, they usually will meet with their delegates. But nevertheless, when you meet with the aide or the actual member, your presence is known, and it carries a lot of weight with those members.
Well, and I appreciate you talking about that, because that's another thing I hear a lot about in grassroots advocacy work in general is, well, money rules politics. And I mean, you're living proof, and so was Bill Signer and the other activists that got involved and showed up in DC, that you can beat a more well-funded organization. What would you say was your big takeaway? I mean, did you know that you were going to be successful?
No, in fact, I have to admit, it was overwhelming. It looked very daunting to believe that we could neutralize the Bell lobbyists because I probably, like a lot of people, I was a bit cynical. Well, they're not going to listen to individual dealers, and but we're going to give it a shot, and we're going to get in there and tell our story. And again, if your story is true, if it rings true, they have to ask themselves, why wouldn't I support or make some adjustments to this legislation? And that's really where we went. We weren't looking for a carve out. We were explaining to them, look, our future lies in your hands. If you if you don't adjust this law to provide some level of protection so we can compete fairly, these guys are going to wipe us out. And I don't believe that's changed today. I think we still have laws that damage our businesses, and but the point, the original point, if you get in there and fight, and they see the passion in your eyes, and they realize, hey, I've got a real business. I've got 20 employees. I've got 100 employees. These people are counting on you, Senator or Congressman, to save us. Otherwise, unemployment. And that was a big issue we used. How many employees we all had, and part of the talking point, our industry has hundreds of thousands of employees, and this is going to impact those small businesses. So I didn't think I knew we'd give it a shot. We'd try hard, but as the momentum picked up, I started to really believe that we might have a chance. And then the day I got a call from the Senator of the Commerce Committee, who incredible call, if you can imagine getting a call like this from a chairman of the committee, Commerce Committee, says, okay, he says, you guys have made this loud and clear. We are going to find a way to get this legislation done. But he said, these bills, you have to understand, they provide a lot of funding for a lot of members of Congress, and what we prefer is for you to reach an agreement with them. And he said, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the Bells that they need to sit down and reach an agreement with you, or we are going to just open the door and let you have everything you want, and they'll have no say. Well, the cool part about that was he wasn't telling the Bells that he told me. He was giving them this ultimatum. So I had a bit of a negotiating advantages in that I knew they had to make a deal, and they didn't know I knew that. And that was, but still took weeks and weeks of negotiations with the Bells. Bill Signer and I, worked on that. We finally got the points got them to agree, and went back to the Commerce Committee. And there's actually a lot more of that story, but again, we're limited in time today. And I think it's quite fascinating. They really still tried to bully us, but again, knowing that they had to reach a deal, in the end, we got what we needed, and incredible. So if you fight, if you stick with it, and you do those basic things, you can win, and I know you can still do that today in DC, but it takes work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to combine actually kind of the next two parts a little bit here. I'm going to have Hannah actually post something in the chat for folks to join. We actually have a few campaigns ongoing right now, and as a lot of you know, we share those campaigns here on this show. ESA is supporting a school security bill that we hope that we can get some of you to also jump in and join and support. And while that gets posted, I did see we have a question from Kirk McDowell, who you might know, Stan Martin. And he says, Stan, with all the great things you have personally accomplished within the industry and the fast-paced growth we see, what continues to keep you up at night? What is still concerning to you?
Wow, I might have to think about that a little. Well, really the changing technology and the DIY. I mean, there's a lot of competitors out there, and there always have been. But yeah, if I'm still in my company, I'd be paying attention to the laws in this country to ensure we have some fair competition. I'd be a part of the National Association to have my interests represented, and part of what helps me sleep at night, let me turn that around a little bit, is knowing that we've got people like Jake and Holly Boardman there at ADT and others that are advocates, and Shane McCleary, they're out there working hard for our industry to keep these laws in balance, and that's probably the shortest answer without thinking about it a bit longer. Thanks, Kurt, for setting me up like that.
Well, Stan, I can't believe we're already close to time. And I knew this was going to happen because you and I both are natural storytellers. I feel like I wish this show could go for an hour, but with our next couple of minutes, I guess we'll kind of move to close. But I did want you to tell us a little bit about SIAC. Tell us how the industry can support SIAC, what it's working on, and we'll wrap up with that one.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. We represent the interests of the industry to law enforcement, and again, quick story. 20 years ago, before we were formed, most people don't know there was an ICP resolution that was pending that would unilaterally withdraw police response to all alarm systems. I mean, we were at the edge of losing all police response, and obviously that would affect how we sell systems and market to folks. And we had to get in there and work on this issue, and that's probably what we've done. We've come up with a model ordinance, best practices, and we educate law enforcement just like we have members of Congress on good solutions to alarm management. And I believe for the most part we keep law enforcement responding with good balance ordinances, and that's our job. And it doesn't end because we're seeing a lot of turnover in law enforcement. Chiefs that we dealt with for years are gone. New people moving up the ranks, they have to be educated as well. So that's our job. Keep them educated and let them know what works. So hopefully they'll continue to respond and provide safe communities and a good add to our business model of and for success. So.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that because, I mean, you guys are very focused on the local level, and obviously, ESA and some of our association friends and other members are very engaged on the state and federal level. So there's areas of opportunity everywhere for our members and for their employees, everyone, to get involved in these processes. Even after the successes you've had, you're still doing it, which is great. And like I said, that's why you are the inspiration and now the namesake of our Excellence in Advocacy, the Stan Martin Award with ESA. So thanks again so much, Stan. I kept my promise. You got less than a minute before your next meeting, and I did my best. I really appreciate you coming on today, Stan. Really do.
Hey, thanks, Kirk. And again, dealers watching, please get involved. Your future is at stake, and you can make a difference. Jake will help you. Jake and ESA will help you. So thank you. Thanks for letting me be a part.
Funny you mentioned that, because I did make Kirk go and testify in Oregon last year, and he still hasn't forgiven me on that. So, well, thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. I've been your host, Jake Bronger, and I look forward to seeing you for our next episode in September. Thanks so much.